Daniel chapter 7. I like Daniel, don't we? Ezekiel, Amos. Wait a minute. Back where that is. There's Daniel. Daniel chapter 7. Let's look at verse 13. You got it? Daniel chapter 7, verse 13. I saw in the night vision, and behold, one like what? The Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. And there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all people, nations, and language should serve him. His dominion and an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. The Son of Man in Daniel 7, 13 and 14 is standing before the throne of God, ready to take his kingdom. When Jesus called himself the Son of Man, it's his own title for himself. He was quoting and proving Daniel. Now, just think about it again. Here is this man who is paralyzed. Has been paralyzed. He's forgotten how to walk. To say you're healed and to say now you have to go immediately into a 2-year rehabilitation. I'm going to heal you, but you're going to have to learn how to walk. Now this healing is going to take about 2 years for you to go into a place and learn how to move your hands and so forth. That's what happens. I'm going to heal you, but it's going to take you about 10 years to learn how to do it. Might have been a more reasonable approach, but to say to the man, get up, take your stuff, put it under your arms, and go home. Now he hadn't walked. Now we don't know how long he had not walked. I mean, it could have been 5 years, it could have been 10 years, it could have been 12 years, it could have been 6 months. But the fact of it is, he had not walked. He had apparently had forgotten to walk. And God said, get up out of your couch and go out the front door. And the man says, how can I do that? I haven't walked before. Can I get the 4 men to come down from the roof and come inside and help me walk? I believe the man got up, don't you think, and ran out. He was healed. Get up, take your stuff, put it under your arms, and go home. Don't take 2 steps with a walker. Go home. You're talking about a creative miracle here. I always kind of wonder why the people on TV at Benny Hinn's meetings, when they get healed, fall over.
I always wondered that too.
Jesus said, get up and walk and run out of here. In Luke chapter 5, Jesus healed this man and told him to get up and go home. You're healed, and they fall flat on the ground. That's weird, isn't it? Now look at the consequences in verse 25. Now we move to the consequences in verse 25. And at once. And at once. What did he do? He rose up before them, took up what he had been laying on, and what? And he went home. Right. He did exactly what Jesus told him to do. All of this, all of his bones hardened perfectly. All of his muscles were created right there on the spot by the Lord. All the hinges of his joints worked perfectly. All that dried up and astonished, all the elements of the psychic of that man were immediately recreated, brand new. His brain went into full function. His arms went into full function so that he could carry what he was. He didn't say to the men, I'm not quite healed yet. Would y'all mind coming down here and help me carry my stuff with me? He was a perfect man in his body. What he was prior lying on, and he picked it up and just went home glorifying the Lord. We don't know how far home was, but he took it, and he must have been a wonderful walk. That's one of the things you see in the healing of Jesus, is that they went instant. Instant. Total healing. No rehab. The Creator is creating. He created new human parts. God knows what you need to keep you with Him. You know, we all have human illnesses. Danny has problems. But God knows that. More than likely, if I may say this, prior to Danny's problems, my understanding is he didn't come to church. He wasn't really interested in church, from what I understand. He's a good guy. But when this happened to Danny, you can't keep him away from church. Let me put it this way. I'm glad that God allowed that to happen to Danny. Because when that happened to Danny, Danny became a Christian. Not only did God save his soul, but He chose not now to save his body, but He will one of these days. You'll have a perfect body in heaven. Amen. Because you've been saved. But because of your illness, God knows you best. And so, it's not that... But see, God knows what we need more to be what He is. And what we should be. He just said, go home. And He did exactly. The last part of verse 25, I want you to notice. The last part of verse 25 says, He went home, what? Glorifying God. The Bible, of course, sometimes understates things, doesn't it? Yeah. Glorifying God. I mean, you could go on for paragraphs describing this guy was probably jumping and leaping and dancing and parading and praising and singing hallelujah. And could hardly stand it until he got to the house and walked in the door, died, you know. And they all were shocked when they saw him, because when he left home, he couldn't walk. And when he came back, he was totally healed. Died. But the best part of this wasn't that he was walking home. The best part was that he was cleansed of sin. Amen. And I don't know what he expected when he started out that morning. I don't know what his four buddies expected, but I'm sure he didn't expect what he got. Glorifying God. Glorifying God. It reminds me of the angels. That's what they are doing in heaven when they announce the birth of the Messiah. He was filled with praise, honoring God with thanks and joy, and you can be sure, if it was Westinghouse, you can be sure he knew who Jesus was. Amen. He may not have had a fully defined Christology. He probably had been in church with Weston, but before his event, but he had one now. He knew that he had just met God. He knew that he had just met God. If people would get healed and give God the praise, but we think man heals us. Whenever time something happens, we want to go to a doctor. And we should. They're going to have to carry me to the doctor when I go. One time, I ain't going to go in. I better not go there. And the things that come to your mind when you're preaching that you just need to keep your mouth shut. But they knew only God could forgive sin, and they knew only God could heal completely.
Amen.
And when that happened to this man, he knew he had met God. And then there goes the Pharisees and the scribes. They left shortly after the man, and they went down the street cussing God out, calling him a blasphemer, full of anger, resentment, and further down the satanic path of rejection and deeper into their own darkness, seeking to kill God, as it were. God had just healed the man. You understand that, right? He just healed the man. He went praising God. The others wanted to kill him. Final response is noted in verse 26. They were all seized with astonishment. This is the crowd. You've got the man on one side who has just been regenerated, both physically and spiritually. And you've got the Pharisees on the other side who have just plunged deeper into their resentment. And you've got the group in the middle, the crowd in the middle, and you've always going to see the people in the middle. All the way through the story of Jesus, you will see the believers who are transformed. You'll see the angry, hostile religious leaders who hate everything they see. And then you see the mass in the middle, that sort of mixed multitude, divided between sort of onlookers, sort of half-hearted disciples, and those who are becoming true disciples, sort of mixed in the mass in the middle. So you've got the extreme on both sides, and you've got people in the middle. They were all surprised. In verse 26, with astonishment. They were literally just shaken, seized with astonishment. With astonishment. Eureka. Ecstasy. They were ecstatic. And this is a word for amazement. They were stunned. They were shocked by what they had just experienced. People today can claim they heal people, and some they do, but if they haven't healed their soul, they haven't accomplished any purpose. There was absolutely no human explanation for what they saw. And they too began glorifying God. They said, "Oh God, what you have done today has come from you." They had seen salvation. They had seen forgiveness. They had seen creation. And I'm sure many of them, even in that crowd, were temporarily, like in John chapter 6, there were many disciples who followed Jesus, and when he said hard things, they left. They want to be saved, but as soon as the pastor says something like, you need to come to church. I remember when, what's his name? Brett. He wanted to be saved. He wanted what his sister had. And he said, "What do I do next?" "Well, you got to come to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. You got to start giving, and you got to be nice to me." He's now been doing it now for 25 years. I think he got it. But for every one Brett, there's 10 that said the same thing that didn't do it. And who got saved? The person that does it. Not the person who says he wants to be saved and never does anything thereafter. He didn't get saved. And Jesus said to Peter, "Are you going to go away?" And he said, to whom shall we go? You and you alone have the words of eternal life. If a person gets born again and gets saved, he'll want to be where he can hear the eternal words of God. Then there were in the multitude a mixed group of people who were at different places in terms of their understanding and commitment to Christ. But for the moment, there were, as they always are through the Gospels, the crowd are literally shocked by His power, and they begin glorifying God. And I say, some, it was temporary and perhaps superficial. There are many who walk the aisles after an emotional sermon about going to hell, and they go to the altar wanting to be saved, but by the time they walk out the door, they have forgot everything that's been said and go living the ungodly way that they've always lived, and they never got saved. And then it says in verse 26, and they were filled. This means literally overwhelmed with fear. What does that mean? What does it mean to be filled with fear? Well, what were they fearful of? Well, the word here is phobia.